Thank you, Jubilee. That was lovely. Here we depart from the musical portion of our show to bring in Betsy Scott. I first worked with Betsy back in the 90s when she became a mainstay of the yearly Afternoon in Ireland shows, which we produced at the Performing Arts Centre for St. Patrick's Day. And may I say, she stole nearly every show. Betsy started doing official theater in junior high school and came up doing musical theater and then straight drama and comedy while living and working in Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, San Francisco. She garnered several awards for her work at the Magic Theater in San Francisco before moving her young family to Alaska in 1982. In Alaska, Betsy worked with the Alaska Repertory Theater and helped create Pacific Rim Theater, worked at Cyrano's Off-Center Playhouse, and in 2014, she made a CD of original music and still finds singing, songwriting, and storytelling to be the purest form of theater. She has recently moved to Athens, Georgia to be closer to family, and today she brings her prodigious storytelling skills to our main stage. Please welcome Betsy Scott.
Greetings. It's an honor to be here. You know, I've been unpacking my things, and I found a story, and I want to share it with you. It is from Ireland, of course. I've been thinking a lot about what happens nowadays. Words are very powerful. There once was a king and a queen who lived very happily together. They had 12 fine sons, but no daughter. It's funny how we are always wishing for what we haven't got and are not happy with what we have. It's not enough. And so it was with the queen. How she wanted a daughter. One winter, she was looking out the window, and there upon the white, fresh snow on the brawn, the butcher had killed a calf, and there was blood on the snow, and a raven stood nearby. If only I had a daughter with skin as white as the snow, and cheeks as red as that blood, and hair as black as the raven. I would give every one of my 12 sons to have her. And the moment those words came out of her mouth, a chill came upon her, and a fright. And there before her stood a very severe old woman. That was a very wicked wish you made. Do you know? And to punish you, it shall be granted. You shall have that beautiful daughter that you desire. But on the day she is born, you will lose all your other children. And the old woman was gone. And that's the way it turned out. And when she expected her delivery, she had all of her children put in one room with guards inside and outside to protect them. But the hour and the moment that that beautiful girl was born, the guards inside and outside heard a whirling and a whistling, and each one of those sons turned into a wild goose, flew out the window, one after another, shot out over the forest like arrows. Well, the king was in such grief for the loss of his sons, but he would have been enraged and he knew that his wife was so much to blame for it. Everyone called the little princess Snow White and Rose Red because of her beautiful complexion, and she was the most loving and lovable girl that there ever was. And when she was 12 years old, she began to be sad and lonely. She had heard of her brothers, but she started asking her mother, tormenting her mother with questions about her brothers, who she thought were dead. No one had ever told her what exactly had happened to them. And the secret was weighing so heavy on the queen, on her conscience. The girl seemed old enough. She wanted to know. So she told her. Well, Mother, it was on my account. My poor brothers were changed into wild geese and are now suffering probably all kinds of hardships. Well, before the world is a day older, I'll be off to seek them. I'll find them and I'll try to restore them to their own shapes. I will, Mother. Well, the king and the queen had her watched, had her guarded. That night, she got out. She took through the woods. She headed past the woods of the kingdom and on through that night into the next day. And into the next evening, she came upon a beautiful little wooden cottage out in the middle of seemingly nowhere, with a beautiful garden and a gate and a hedge. Just at sunset, nobody seemed to be home, so she walked in, and there in the room was a long table with 12 chairs and 12 plates and forks and knives and spoons and goblets. And she went into the back room, and there was 12 beds. I wonder. And just then she heard the sound of the gate opening and footsteps and men's voices. And who should walk in but 12 fine men? And oh, what grief and anger they felt when they saw her. What misfortune has sent you here, said the eldest. For the sake of a girl, we were obliged to leave our father's court and be the shape of wild geese all day. That's 12 years ago. We took a solemn oath that we would kill the first young girl we came across. It's a pity to put such an innocent and handsome girl to rest, but we must keep our oath. We're honorable, but so he pulls his sword. He said, "Honorable man, you keep your oath." He did not want to do this. He pulled out his sword. She dropped to her knees, and so, "Oh, please, I am your only sister, who only just yesterday found out about you. And I left right away. I ran away from mother and father, and I am here. I am here to try and save you and restore you and to help you however I can." At that point, all 12 of them fell to their knees. And oh, cursed be our oath. What are we to do? "I'll tell you that." And there was the old woman. "I'll tell you that. You break that wicked oath you made." Oh, wicked oath. If you attempted to lay an uncivil hand on that young girl, I'd turn you into 12 stalks of ragweed. But I wish well for you and her. She is appointed to be your deliverer in this way. She must spin and knit 12 shirts for you out of bog down, to be gathered by her own hands in the moor just outside this wood. It will take her 5 years to do it. And if she once speaks, or laughs, or cries, the whole time, you will have to remain wild geese by day till you're called out of this world. Take care of your sister. It's worth your while. And she was gone. So, at that point, the only strife was which brother was going to hug and kiss their sister the first. She was the youngest. She's only 12 years old. So for 3 long years, she occupied herself by pulling bog down, spinning it, knitting it into shirts, and at the end of 3 years, she had made 8. 8 of them. And during all that time, she never spoke. She never laughed. And she never cried. And that last was the hardest for her. But one fine day, she was sitting in the garden spinning, and in sprung a magnificent greyhound, jumped up, put his paws on her shoulders, licked her face and her hair, and the next minute a fine young man on a horse came up to the gate and asked his leave, and could he come in? And she gave a little nod, and he came in, and he apologized so much for intruding and had so many questions of her that not a word could he get out of her. Oh, he was smitten. First thing he saw her, but he could not take his eyes off her. And of course she was smitten too, until he broke down. He told her, I am a king. I am a king of the country just bordering this forest. And he came many times, and finally he begged for her to come home and be his wife. And she finally nodded her head, put her hand in his. Well, she knew well enough the good fairy and her brothers would be able to find her. And before she went, though, she brought out her basket holding all of the bog down and holding the 8 shirts, and the attendants took charge, and she got up on the horse with the prince, and off she rode. Well, the only thing that disturbed the prince, he was so happy, was that his stepmother would be very angry with what he had done. But he was the king. He had full master of his kingdom, so when he arrived, he found the bishop, he dressed her beautifully, and they got married. He knew by her manners that she was of high birth. And no two could be so fond. They loved each other so. Well, the wicked stepmother, and wicked she was. She was going to find a way to make mischief. Well, she was only a woodman's daughter. She was nothing. But nothing she could do could disturb the love he had for her, or the high opinion that he had for her. Well, in good time, she delivered a beautiful young boy child. And the king was beside himself with joy and love for her, and she for him and he for her. And of course, all the grandeur and all the fuss and about the child and the beautiful queen made the the wicked stepmother even more jealous and vindictive, and she was bound and determined to stop their happiness. She got a sleeping posset, and she gave it to the young mother one night. And while she was pacing around, thinking of how she was going to make way with the child, she looked out the window, and there was a fox. No, not a fox, a wolf, big and large, and licking its chops and looking up at her. In a moment, she grabbed the baby and she threw it out the window. And the wolf grabbed it in its hands, and in a moment it was over the fence and gone. And then she pricked her finger, and she took the blood and put it around the mouth of the young mother. And then, when screaming out into the hall, well, the young king had just come back from a hunting trip, and she entered in, told him to come into the house, and she was beside herself and cried and cried and wrung her hands and brought him to the bedchamber. And wasn't the king frightened to see his wife with blood on her mouth and the baby gone? What was he to think? And he began to maybe have doubts about this beautiful wife that would not speak or cry or laugh. And just think of her. I mean, she had to keep down all this bitter sorrow. She couldn't laugh. She couldn't cry. She could not speak. Well, the young king would not allow anyone to be called. And he ordered the stepmother to say that the child had fallen out of the mother's hands of the window and a wolf had run off with it. Well, she promised. She said she would, but she didn't. She told everybody what she thought she saw and what the mother had done. Now, the young queen could do nothing. She just went on making the shirts. And so sad because her husband now had lost some faith and become distant. And sometimes she would see the geese out in the trees looking in at her. She had that. And finally, she got to the 12th shirt, except there was only one sleeve left to do on the 12th shirt. And she was obliged to take to her bed because she was pregnant again and giving birth to a young girl. And it was a beautiful little girl. And the king now was on his guard. And he would not let the mother or the child out of his sight. He always had someone watching them. Well, the wicked stepmother bribed them. Or gave them sleeping possets. So sure enough, she drugged the queen again, took the young baby, and sure enough, there was that wolf. One baby, how about another? I'm hungry. She tossed it out the window, pricked her finger, blood again, and this time, screaming out into the hall. I cannot tell you. It would be like... It would take hours for me to tell you all of the vindictiveness and the confusion and the hate and the accusations and all of the confusion and the distraught feeling of the king, everything that was happening. I can't go into detail. And the young mother just thought her life would leave her. She was in such a state. She could not think. She could not pray. She sat like a stone and worked away at the arm of the 12th shirt. The king was for taking her to the house where he found her. But the stepmother would have none of it, and nor the judges or the lords of the court. She would to be burned at the stake that very day at 3:00. sat and worked on that 12th arm. They came to take her out, and they led her to the pyre. She took all the 12 shirts with her, but there were still a few stitches left. She was not done yet. And as they were tying her to the stake, she finished one little tiny bit it off. And she was overwhelmed, and she cried, and there were tears on the shirt. And then she called out, "I am innocent! Call my husband!" Well, the executioner put his arm up, but another wicked man took his fire and set it aflame. And she saw the fire start to come up. One last thing that she might do. "Brothers, oh brothers, where are you?" No sooner had she called out than there was a whirling and a whistling, and winds came up, and 12 magnificent wild geese came flying about the pyre, and with them they brought clouds and rain, and they would fly past her, and she'd reach out a shirt, dive into it, and land. And at the end of it, there were 12 magnificent men standing about the pyre, and the rains were coming down and putting out the fire. And the executioner came after the eldest, and he took a big stake and whacked him hard. Didn't have to hit him again. And the king came rushing with all the commotion, broke through the crowd, and saw the 12 men and his wife crying and laughing and talking and overcome with glorious emotions. And he just stood in awe. And the crowd parted again. And there came a beautiful woman, carrying a young baby girl, and had a young boy on her hand, guiding him. And the reunion then was like sunlight and rainbows. They were laughing, and the king and the queen were hugging, and the children were between them, and they were hugging, and the brothers were around them, hugging. Never such joy was there. Never such joy. And in the moment where they all realized, where is that fine woman who brought our children back? Who was the wolf? Who was the severe old woman? Who was the good fairy? They were lucky. I think we all have good fairies. But we do have to be careful of our words. So everyone, be well, be kind. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Did I tell you she was fabulous? Again, we'd like to mention our sponsors: Reilly's Pub at 317 Fireweed Lane, Kate Odell, Arctic Siren, Both Ears Live Sound, Frostline Productions, the Celtic Community of Alaska, and the Scottish Club of Alaska. We thank you so much for your sponsorships.